Welcome back to BeFM Drama, where we turn great literature into gripping radio. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and today we're bringing you part 3 in our 5-part adaptation of the Six Napoleons, a classic Sherlock Holmes story from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A bizarre series of burglaries has swept London. In each case, the only thing stolen has been an identical, cheap plaster bust or statue head of the French Emperor Napoleon. The most recent burglary has ended in murder and provided the clue that an Italian workman known as Beppo might have played a role in the crime. Holmes and Watson are now tracing the plaster heads throughout London in an attempt to identify their origins and learn why a man would kill to find them. Having spoken to one of the 2 sellers of the heads, the men now travel to the workshop where they were first manufactured. In rapid succession, we passed through the fringe of fashionable London, hotel London, theatrical London, literary London, commercial London, and finally, maritime London, until we came to a riverside city of 100,000 souls, where the sweltering tenements are packed with the outcasts of Europe. Here, in a broad boulevard, once the abode of wealthy city merchants, we found the sculpture workshop we searched for. It was a single large room in which 50 workers were carving or molding. The manager, a big blonde German, received us kindly and gave a clear answer to all Holmes's questions. His record books showed that hundreds of casts had been taken from a marble copy of Devine's head of Napoleon, but that the 3 which had been sent to Morse Hudson a year or so before had been one half of a batch of 6, the other 3 being sent to Harding Brothers in Kensington. There was no reason why those 6 should be any different from the other casts. The manager could suggest no possible reason why anyone would wish to destroy them. In fact, he laughed at the idea. Their wholesale price was a mere 6 shillings, and a retailer would get no more than 12 for them. The casts were taken in 2 molds from each side of the face, and then the 2 profiles of plaster were joined together to make a complete bust. The work was usually done by Italian craftsmen in that very room. When finished, the busts were put on a table in the passageway to dry, and afterwards stored away. That was all he could tell us, but when Holmes showed the manager the photograph, it had a remarkable effect. His face flushed with anger, and his brows nodded over his blue Teutonic eyes.
Ah, the rascal. Yes, indeed, I know him very well. This has always been a respectable business, and the only time we have ever had the police in here was because of this very fellow. It was more than a year now. He knifed another Italian in the street and ran to this very workshop with the police on his heels. He was arrested here. Beppo was his name. I never knew his family name. Serves me right for engaging a man with such an angry face. But he was a good workman. One of the best. What did he get? The man he stabbed lived, and Beppo got off with only a year in prison. He must be out by now, but he hasn't shown his face here. But his cousin works here, and I dare say he could tell you where he is.
No. Not a word to the cousin. Not a word, I beg you. The matter is very important, and the deeper I go, the more important it seems to become. When you referred in your ledger book to the sale of these Napoleon casts, I noticed that the date was June 3rd of last year. Could you give me the date that Beppo was arrested?
I could tell you roughly by the date he was last paid, May 20th of last year.
Thank you. I don't think that I need to intrude upon your time and patience anymore.
With a final word of caution to the manager that he should say nothing to Beppo's cousin, we turned our faces westward once more. It was late in the afternoon before we were able to snatch a hasty lunch at a restaurant. A news bill at the entrance announced the Kensington outrage, murder by a madman, and the contents of the paper showed that Mr. Horace Harker had gotten his account of the action into print after all. 2 columns were occupied with a highly sensational telling of the whole incident. Holmes propped it up and read while he ate. Once or twice he chuckled to himself.
This is all right, Watson. Listen to this. it is satisfactory to know that there can be no difference of opinion in this case, since Mr. Lestrade, one of the most experienced members of the official force, and Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the well-known consulting expert, have agreed that the grotesque series of incidents which have ended in so tragic a fashion arose from lunacy rather than from deliberate crime. No explanation save mental aberration can cover the facts. The press, Watson, is the most valuable ally if you only know how to use it. And now, if you have quite finished, we'll run back to Kensington and see what the manager of Harding Brothers has to say on the matter.
The founder of that great emporium proved to be a brisk, crisp little person, very dapper and quick, with a clear head and a ready tongue.
Yes, sir. I've already read the account in the evening papers. Mr. Horace Harker's a customer of ours. We supplied him with the bust some months ago. We ordered 3 busts of that sort from Gelder and Company of Stepney. They're all sold now. To whom? One to Mr. Harker, you see, and one to Mr. Josiah Brown of Labonham Lodge, Chiswick, and one to Mr. Sandford of Lower Grove Road, Reading. No, I've never seen the face in the photograph. I would hardly forget it, for I've seldom seen one angrier. We do have a couple of Italians on staff, workpeople and cleaners. I dare say they might get a look at that sales book if they wanted to. There's no particular reason for keeping it secure. Well, it's a very strange business, and I hope that you will let me know if anything comes of your investigation.
Holmes had taken several notes during Mr. Harding's evidence, and I could see that he was thoroughly satisfied by the turn which affairs were taking. He made no remark, however, save that, unless we hurried, we should be late for our appointment with Lestrade. Sure enough, when we reached Baker Street, the detective was already there, and we found him pacing up and down in a fever of impatience. His look of importance showed that his day's work had not been in vain.
Well, what luck, Mr. Holmes?
We have had a very busy day, and not an entirely a wasted one. We have seen both the retailers and also the wholesale manufacturers. I can trace each of the busts now from the beginning.
The busts? Well, you have your own methods, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, and it is not for me to say a word against them. But I think I have done a better day's work than you. I have identified the dead men.
You don't say so.
And found a cause for the crime.
Splendid.
We have an inspector who makes a specialty of Saffron Hill and the Italian Quarter. Well, this dead man had a Catholic emblem around his neck, and that, along with his features, led me to believe he was from Southern Europe. Inspector Hill knew him the moment he caught sight of the body. His name is Pietro Venucci from Naples, and he is one of the greatest cutthroats in London. He is connected with the Mafia, which, as you know, is a secret criminal society enforcing its law by murder in certain immigrant communities. Now, you see how the affair begins to clear up. The other fellow is probably also Italian and a member of the Mafia. He has broken the rules in some fashion. Pietro was set upon his track. Probably the photograph we found in his pocket is of the murderer himself, so that Pietro might know his target. He follows the fellow, sees him enter a house, and waits outside for him. In the ensuing scuffle, he receives his death wound. How is that, Mr. Sherlock Holmes?
Holmes clapped his hands approvingly.
Excellent, Lestrade, excellent. But I didn't quite follow your explanation of the destruction of the busts.
The busts. You can never get those busts out of your head. After all, it is nothing but petty larceny, 6 months at the most. It is the murder we're really investigating. And I tell you that I'm gathering all the threads into my hands.
And the next stage?
Is a very simple one. I shall go down with Hill to the Italian Quarter, find the man in the photograph, and arrest him on a charge of murder. Will you come with us?
I think not. I believe we can attain our solution in a simpler way. I can't say for certain because it all depends. Well, it all depends upon a factor which is completely outside our control, but I have great hopes. In fact, the betting is exactly 2 to 1 that if you will come with us tonight, I shall be able to help bring your target to justice.
In the Italian Quarter?
No, I fancy Chiswick is the address where we are more likely to find him.
With that, we've come to the end of the 3rd episode in our 5-part adaptation of the Six Napoleons here on BeFM Drama. Now that he's traced the history and ownership of the 6 busts of Napoleon at the center of the case, Sherlock Holmes seems ready to launch the final stage in his plan to catch the criminal. What does the great detective have planned, and will that plan be successful? Join us again tomorrow evening to find out here on BeFM Drama.